fatigue is real, and like that's just I feel like that's why it's still like I take back what I said before, which is like, oh, I wish I could spend all my money on TikTok, but like I really can't because we don't have enough resources for the amount of content that it needs.
All right, folks. So I'm here in the triple whale lair here right now, and we have party club mode. But I think everybody wanted. No, you want these ones, right? The angelic lights.
Yeah,
maybe a little bit. Ash still seems very disappointed. I promise it's cooler in person.
Go back to the blue.
Ash is backtracking because he just saw the blue again, and he was like, "Actually, the blue looks pretty good." Now that
you're into it now,
the blue does
into
look
it now.
Good.
Yeah, he's adjusted.
Let's go.
Drop in the comments. What color are we walking with? What are we doing here?
Okay, because we got
just cycle them. Just cycle it. Throughout. Every now and then we switch topics. You switch colors.
That's actually not a horrible idea. I love this. And if you folks
don't
know
format.
who that is, we are back with your favorite D2C pod. I am in the new Triple Whale podcast studio. It's actually, to be fair, set up to be an in-person studio, so I'm kind of rigging it because we had some cool stuff going on. We're finishing up our t-shirt wall. Ash, who hasn't sent his Avi
it's on its way. It's on its way.
Unbelievable, this guy. So if you're seeing a little bit of, if you're watching this and you see the unique shot where I'm not in my office, but we do have a cool Triple Whale sign, so I will give you that. But Ash is signing off on the blue. He was giving me shit about it before, but he's signing off on the blue.
I do like it now.
But all right, as we will. Well, that is a bunch of preamble, but Ash, my co-host, partner in crime, always a pleasure. And then one of the smartest media buyers, we actually had one of my favorite episodes on our sister podcast, You're Not Your ROAS, John Coyle, one of the best media buyers I know, and just generally amazing humans, ex-runner, sponsored by Skechers. I don't think we've ever had a pro athlete sponsored on here before. We're just breaking all the rules.
Yeah. John. Yeah. I mean, it was like, it was like 60 pounds ago. I measure it in pounds, not years.
Fair,
but it was
fair enough.
It was a minute.
I've been on that tip too. I'm trying to get back on the health tip. My fiance is making me my lunches now. I signed up at this fancy gym that I've only been twice to, but Ash, you stopped posting all your inspirational pics, and so I fell off the wagon. What happened?
Yeah, I took a break during the summer. I'm gonna get back to it next week. September 1st, baby.
Let's go in. New month, new me.
Yeah, exactly, baby. Let's do it. Q4, let's do it.
Q4, let's go. Yeah, if anybody else in D2C wants to lose some LB, Shaq's over here fucking getting shredded, buying multi-million-dollar homes. What am I doing? I'm over here just slumming in a studio with
he just always makes you feel like that, right?
He doesn't, though. It's crazy, right? Like,
I know, but then when you talk to him, you're like, you really deserve all this. Oh, yep, you deserve all this. Yeah,
he's such a good human. But yeah, I got a little bit of like, give me some of that house. Let me crash, man. What's going on? Give me that. His puppy's all trained up. I mean, what? This guy
just living.
He's gonna come out like 20 years later. He's a serial killer with like a bunch of bodies under his basement or something. Fucking Shaq. Jokes,
knew it the whole time.
Knew it. Just jokes. Speaking of Shaq, shameless plug. Nashville Geek Out is in November. So you guys should sign up for that. I think tickets are on sale. Are you speaking, John?
I believe I have been put on the reserve. I've been put on the IR.
You're on the IR right now. Okay, so possibly.
I do not think I will speak. Yeah, because if you're on the IR at Geek Out these days, there's nobody's gonna sit. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. No, it is definitely the. Ron crushed it. Yours was amazing too. In what was it, San Diego, I believe, right? Man, that seems like ages
San
ago.
Diego was the last one I was at. Yep.
Amazing. Okay, for people that don't know you though, John, kind of give us your little accolades, what you're doing now, kind of what you've done to kind of color the water, and then we'll get into the discussion.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how I got here. I don't even know what the show's about. Somebody said D2C. I looked that up. I don't know what it means. No, I'm just kidding. So my background, I'm currently head of performance at the Structured Agency. That's why we're talking about Shaq. Some people probably don't know Shaq. They're like, you talking about the basketball player? That's what we're talking about, Shaq, Nickel Shackelford, who is one of the founders of Structured Agency. I'm currently head of performance there. I more or less run that. He brought me in to sort of replace him running the media buying team, overseeing all of our paid media efforts there. Before that, I had my own agency, and not really before, sort of overlapping. I had my own agency called Explosive Growth Marketing that got acquired by Structured. So, sort of part of an acquisition, acqui-hire. You didn't know that?
I didn't know that. No, I didn't
Yeah,
know that.
cool. You just haven't paid attention the other times I've done this whole thing.
This guy, you guys give me shit about the studio. I'm not paying attention to the guests. Holy hell! Oh man, I'm just getting roasted.
Rough day for Rod. You're not gonna have me back. You're like, John just makes fun of me when he comes. Yeah. So before that, I was doing the EGM thing, building my own agency, and before that, I was working at agencies, and then before that, I worked in retail, and I did sales. I think I've told this story on You're Not Your ROAS, but I used to be a mall kiosk salesperson. I'm like the untouchable, the people you're like, don't look at them or they're just gonna grab you and start selling you stuff. That was me at one point. And I did do that. I mean, I think I've told this, I give this whole intro on myself so I can tell this story that has nothing to do with e-commerce or advertising, but I know how to juggle. This is a random thing about me, but everybody who's my age who grew up in the city that I grew up in knows how to juggle. We just had it in our elementary school curriculums, and our PE curriculums. So I know how to juggle, which is uncommon, where I went to college. And so I would juggle. I sold this supplement you put into a water bottle. So I'd juggle these water bottles that had the supplement mixed in there, and people would stay that's how I'd get people to look. That was my clickbait, right? That was my ad or my hook. I'd get people to look. And once I noticed that someone I could feel it, you can kind of notice somebody's looking at you. I would catch them. I'd be like, you want a sample? And they're staring at me I forgot the number one rule that you're not supposed to look at these people, so then they'd be like, yeah, sure. And they'd reach their hand out okay, yeah, sure. And then I'd be I'd pull it once they're leaned in a little bit. I'd pull it back and I'd be like, well, this one's lemon. And I'd always use lemon because that's a flavor nobody feels like they want. This one's lemon, but we have other flavors. Do you want to see our other flavors? Now they're going to come over and they're going to look at it and I've got them, and so
Done.
That's basically, that story just describes a whole lot about me, basically.
I'm just thinking out loud here. Hear me out. Spin-off show for the mall kiosk. Instead of D2C, you have mall kiosk tips. No, nothing.
Mall kiosk
tough crowd today, guys. Tough
the mall kiosk folk. Most of them are not looking to make a career out of the mall kiosk. It's not a long-term thing. Yeah, it's usually, especially the kiosk people. Usually they work at 3 different kiosks and one of the stores. Mall people are just mall people.
Yeah, I used to be quite the mall rat when I was a kid too. I did all the stores in there and stuff like that. But yeah, that is one of my favorite stories.
Yeah, and then you date the other mall people, and it's just one little world,
Oh, for sure. It was I did the whole Abercrombie and Fitch. I did all the douchey ones. I was that guy.
Did you work at Hot Topic?
Were you standing outside the store with your shirt off, Robbo? What was going on?
Robbo was selling at Hot Topic.
I didn't do Hot Topic, but I did. This is how old I am. I did Structure. So speaking of Structured, I did Structure, which is now Express for Men. That's how old I am. I did.
Express is a good one. That's one of the better spots to work.
Yeah, I worked at Coach Handbags, which taught me a lot, and then I worked at Nordstrom selling high-end women's shoes. That'll also teach you a lot. That was.
Were you? Do you ever do any kind of sales job, Ash? Ash is no. I've sold a whole bunch of collagen, so I don't know.
Exactly. Sold a whole bunch
sales,
of stock
right?
to keep my portfolio in the green. I don't know what you're talking about, kids.
I was slinging sneakers in college. That was about it.
Were you flipping them?
Yeah.
That's cool.
The whole resale market was insane.
Yeah.
Do you guys remember power hours? Did you guys ever have those at school? Where you'd take a shot of beer every minute?
Oh yes, yeah, every minute.
Yeah, so I used to sell these DVDs where I'd cut up every minute of the popular music videos to make a power hour, and you could put the DVD in. And I used to sell those at my university.
I in my head,
DVDs.
You were talking about you said, did you guys ever do power hours in school? And in my head, you were talking about elementary school. And then you're where you take a shot of beer. I'm didn't
power nap.
We went to the same kind of
nap time.
Oh man. Yeah. Well, I have to say this is probably the most off the rails intro that we've ever had, but it's aligned with the club mode I have here. So it is
you started it. Yeah.
Fair play. So, John, what are you seeing in accounts right now? How are you thinking about acquisition? What is kind of top of mind for you? What are kind of the big wins? What are the things that you're kind of staying away from? Are there any headwinds that you're experiencing? Give people. I know you sit across a lot of big accounts. Kind of
Yeah.
what's the state of the DEC right now?
I mean, so for anyone who's still listening and hasn't been like, this guy has no credibility, uh, I'll give the actual thing that you wanted in the intro, which was like, why should people listen to you? And that is it. So over the last several years, I've managed many millions and spent across a lot of different verticals and different channels even. And that's what Structured does monthly. Like, probably, I don't know, multiple millions of dollars in month of spend across like multiple verticals, which is really interesting. A big trend I'm seeing right now. So I would actually break out like things I'm seeing that are interesting into two categories, and one would be like, what am I seeing accounts wide, and what am I seeing within like one account that's like, oh, that works there, that's working here, like maybe we should try that somewhere else. One of the things I kind of hate about the agency world is that like if you actually look across 20 ad accounts, Facebook ad accounts, Google ad accounts, whatever, if you actually look across like 20 ad accounts, let's say Facebook, which most people kind of think of, you see very little that you can say like that totally works every time. Like there's very little like that you're like, that totally works every time. That kind of creative crushes it every time. So like trends are much harder, because a lot of people are like, you have so much data, you must see the trends. Like trends are, any kind of statistical significance on trends are much harder to spot than you might think. The more data you have, the harder. Like, and maybe there's a tipping point where it's like, if you have Facebook level data, maybe then it's easier, right? Or meta level data, maybe then it's easier. But I will say that a couple of things that I'm seeing that seem to be common, or they've happened more than once, or like more than 3 times or more than 4 times, are number one, media mixing is like for the win right now. So instead of just like, we're not doing so much just like plow money into Facebook and scale, and find a winner and scale, find a winning creative and scale. It's a lot more like, I would say a lot of our most profitable accounts or most profitable brands right now have a heavier mix of Google than they ever have, and some heavier mix of Google than Facebook. And not just search, and not just shop, not just search, shop, PMax. I'm talking, they're running YouTube, they're running display, discovery. So like, here's a tip: if you're not running the discovery network on Google, do it, because we have multiple accounts where it's like, you can look at like the 1-day click ROAS on the discovery network, and it's like really good, or like comparable with Facebook. It's probably not going to scale as well as Facebook because it's not as big, but yeah, so some stuff like that where it's like Google and like the actual Google prospecting channels are starting to like truly take budget away from Facebook, because any way we cut it, any way we look at the data in whatever tool, right? It's like these YouTube is performing at the level of Facebook. Discovery Network's performing at the level of Facebook. PMax is very interesting to me as well. PMax is performing super well across multiple accounts. I haven't yet scaled it, and I wonder where you're at on this, Ash. Like, I haven't yet scaled PMax so hard, and it's so black boxy because you don't know. Like, you're like,
So
are you?
black
Is this
box.
just retargeting? Is like,
Yeah.
like who is this hitting? I haven't scaled it so hard yet that I'm like, this is driving. Like, this is actually driving like new business, new eyeballs, new prospects into my funnel, and it's doing it really effectively from a profit standpoint. But like, the tools are there. It's almost like you're looking at, it's like when you're looking at a player and you're like, he's got all the tools. He could be a good player. He's not proven yet. That's what I think about PMax. So yeah, I'll stop talking because I just rambled for a couple minutes. I've got some other stuff too that we can dive into specifically in Facebook and creatively and stuff like that. But I do want to stop there because like kind of number one is probably like Google really indexing a lot more heavily in Google and the different campaign types. And I wonder, Ash, if you're seeing similar with Obvi.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is absolutely true for like what we're seeing, but just maybe on a different level, right? So we haven't fully gone so hard into Google just because like our category is very expensive, right? You have these
Yeah.
like Top Dogs, Vital
Yeah.
Proteins, Dr. Axe, like just going PPC on this type of stuff, it's like it's very expensive.
Yep.
Um, but I mean, not to say that we're not going to, right? Two, what I am noticing is that when our overall like efforts on top of the funnel, and I'm not just saying like Facebook top of the funnel campaign, I'm saying like how are we introducing new people into our ecosystem? That's like TikTok or even like now YouTube shorts or even like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, utilizing like IG reels and like really getting the reach on some of these organic platforms. Getting like newer people into the ecosystem is like my number one priority right now. And it's
Right.
and when I say that, I'm not saying running prospecting on Facebook because I feel like now more than ever, it's always the frequency is going to be pretty high, right? It's like once you start like feeding people in, they come to the website, you're going to get hit by like a Facebook ad, you're going to keep getting hit with a Facebook ad, right?
Once that
You
machine
may
knows who your
yeah,
people are, it's like
yeah.
it just circles the
It,
wagons no
it
matter
just
what you do.
circles. Yeah, exactly. Right. So, like, I think the biggest piece to our puzzle has always been fully diving into the influencer stuff, which, like you said, right, it's just mixing up this, like, I guess, media mix, right? Of, all right, whether it be Google, because you're attracting a completely new audience, right? People who are looking for the certain product or whatever it is, they're shopping. But then, like, uh, influencers are going to drive a ton of reach and ton of awareness, even though like you may not like get that direct conversion. I've been talking to a lot of people lately, like who've been doubling down on like YouTube influencers,
Mm-hmm.
and like what they've been saying is that the long form content, if you can find like channels that have like they put out 20-minute, 30-minute videos and they're like super engaged audiences, or they have super engaged audiences, you know, hundreds of thousands of views, like you should get a 60-second spot in that video if it relates to your
Yeah.
product, right? So that's like one thing that I'm trying to do right now is dive into YouTube, whether it's like a podcast or like just a
Yeah.
lifestyle influencer, and just be like, hey, I just want a 60-second, you know, clip in the video of like, say, let's say it's the lifestyle influencer, like, hey, I just started using this, let me show you my recipe, whatever it is,
Yeah.
put the link in the comments, discount code, whatever. Whenever I feel like the long form content of like whether it's Facebook or YouTube, people have like written it off because like TikTok is
Mhm.
a new thing. It's like 30-second videos, 60-second videos. But the people who are fully engaged in those long form content are like, whatever they're watching, they're gonna like absorb. And if your like product is in there, I think that's where it's like really gonna drive awareness. So to kind of close this up, we had one of our influencers. I've talked about this influencer a while, right? She's the one that kind of like blew things up for us, and
Yeah.
luckily we just
No,
started
you're talking
working
about.
with her again, right? And she posted a video maybe like 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, 15-minute long video. Okay. But in that 15-minute long video, she talked about us for about 30 seconds, and sales pumped for that like
Yeah.
hour, kind of dropped back down. But now the rest of the week's efficiency from like the ads was like 10 times better,
Yeah.
right? So now imagine just one person, right? Like that video got like 150,000 views within the first day. Now that video continued to go on and get views and this and that, and we were mentioned in it for 30 seconds.
Yeah.
It just improves our efficiencies like everywhere else. And so when that kind of starts to wear off, you start to see this like efficiency or like CPAs kind of go back up. And you're like, what the fuck? Like I thought my ads were doing really well, this and that. And it's like, it's not that. It's just you need more people in your ecosystem.
Yeah. I actually want to come back to TikTok in a second, but I will hit on like in certain some maybe an industry based trend that I see a lot of is anything that we work with that's in like gadgets, tech, accessories, does really well with YouTube product reviewers as well, like really well. And almost always like whatever it is like they'll charge a lot. Like
Yeah.
somebody might a big product reviewer might be like, yeah, it's 100K just for me to review it, and I'm not even guaranteeing I'm going to say good things about it. But if your product's good, you'll say good things about it. And almost always it's like so worth it. You know what I mean? Like if you've got the inventory, it's
Yeah.
like so worth it for at least in that industry, tech and stuff like that. But I want to say something that, or hit on something that you said, which was like the ROAS or the efficiency for the rest of the week was really good during that. I see a lot of that like macro trend, and this isn't media buying, but like a macro trend of like the brands that are good at creating events on a regular basis. And by events, I mean like a mention from a big name, or a new product drop, a new flavor, a new product, a sale. I don't want to rely on sale after
PR or
sale for
something.
events
Yeah.
all the time, but a sale, you know, it would be one variation or one version. New product is great, especially if it's like gonna go fast and be limited. That's the best thing. A lot of people are like, oh, I don't want to sell out a product. That means I'm missing sales. I'm like, you're missing sales if you're not selling out a product, honestly. If you're selling out a product, people will buy it up so much quicker. If you never sell out a product, then there's no urgency ever. But the brands that are really good at creating events on a regular basis like that are the ones that are still growing in what may be a macro trend of tough economic times at the moment. And I would say though that one thing, a challenge that poses, and I'm going to kick this to you, Ash, as well. Like a challenge that poses is how to assess the performance of your media when a brand is so good at creating events. Sometimes we'll work with brands that are creating big events weekly, you know.
Yeah.
That's the outlier. Usually it's like maybe once a month if they're really good. Quarterly is really common. But like it really throws off, you know, like we have one brand that's really good at influencer. It really throws off the paid media because it makes it so much better that it's like, how do I assess this creative test that I'm doing now that I launched, and then it got a day deep, and then this thing happened, and then that thing ended, and so now I have this like really tough read, and like all of these creatives look like winners because they were in this time period, and then I'm not really even going to get that much time till the next event, right? And so do I just hold and not test anything new? I'm wondering how you approach that, because I have a way. I have some. That was kind of one of the things I was going to talk about. Is I have like some stuff that we've started doing around that. But yeah, you're
Yeah.
interested in your thoughts.
So it's funny that you say that, because I'm actually very interested as to what your solution is, because we had I don't know, again, something I probably mentioned before, but we did a community nominated flavor, caramel macchiato. And last year it sold out like once every quarter, right? So like almost 4 times throughout the year. We brought it back about 2 months ago, right? And in my creative testing for that week, because we brought it back as like a full-time flavor instead of like a limited edition flavor. So I was testing content around that specific flavor, right? So now when we launched it, obviously we had the launch and the restock of it to really, kind of boost the sales there. But that entire week, those ads were performing like really, really well, right? They're still considered they're top of the funnel. I'm excluding customers, but those ads still on in platform and in triple, it all looked amazing, right? To the point where, okay, do I scale these now? Like, are these winners? Like,
Right.
or is it just because like we just had this launch, people are still like, they're coming into our ecosystem, they're seeing that there's a restock. Oh, they saw this specific flavor on the ad, let me go and buy it, right? Is it still retargeting in some sense, And then after like 2 weeks, those ads completely crapped out and they weren't actual winners. So
Right.
like, to your point, you can't, like, it's tough to actually do that. So I'm curious, how do
Yeah.
you even determine that? I think initially my first thoughts would be like, is this driving sales on like a first day click, versus like a last, like
Yep.
yeah, you know what I mean? So I'm curious what you're thinking on around there.
Yeah. It has been tough because so there's a couple things that we've and I think you're an in brand media buyer, which actually probably gives you a leg up on thinking about this. Because if you're an agent, I mean, just put yourself in a position of an agency buyer. Like you're going to be like, check out these creatives, bro. Like these
Yeah, you
popped
have to
off,
perform.
right? Like
Yeah.
you're going to be excited about it and you want to tell the client and stuff like that. But it's like, that's the biggest thing. For a minute, I had to be like, hey, all right, hold, wait, like don't say anything yet, right? But then once we started that and doing that, got committed to like actually assessing the like validity of the evergreen creatives and how outside the lift that they were getting. There's a couple things that I've landed on so that you could try. I'll give a couple, but I'll tell you kind of what's worked sort of best for us was, so number one is we have started to create benchmarks for, we'll call it in event and out of event. And this is not that hard because most brands that create events for themselves create the same kind of events on a pretty regular basis, right? So for Obvi, it's going to be like limited flavor drops. Those are the kinds of events you create on a pretty regular basis, or bringing a flavor from limited to permanent, you know? So you could probably categorize them. It's like, it's new flavor drops, limited drops, sales, and graduation of a flavor, right? Like you probably bucket them. So we started to benchmark KPIs for during evergreen period, not in event, and then during period of event by category, right? And this is kind of a lot of work, but like you can go back over this data, right? Because you know when the dates were and stuff like that. And then break it down to at least channel, right? So at least like Facebook, Google, stuff like that. But like within Google, you probably need to break it down to campaign type, you know, like YouTube and shopping aren't the same. But within Facebook, I would even suggest further breakdown of KPIs. So this is another big thing that we're doing right now. Breaking down KPIs by position and funnel has been always a thing, right? Like what is a good retargeting? What is a good prospecting? But we're actually looking at it a little bit differently now. Instead of retargeting and prospecting, we're actually looking at like, what is kind of like, where does this ad sit in like the awareness funnel, right? So like with Obvi, you might have a comparison ad that's like, you know, Obvi versus some other collagen brand. That ad might perform really, really well from a CAC standpoint, or your image ads that just like call out a benefit. Those could perform really, really well from a CAC standpoint, but like what are those at their core? There's something that speaks to somebody who's probably pretty aware already of the problem, aware that collagen is the solution, aware maybe even of your brand and another brand, but at least aware that collagen is the solution. Whereas if you have like an informational video or an advertorial that talks about like, hey, here's what are you feeling this? Like, is this how you feel? Right? Like, let me tell you what problem you're having. Like they're not even problem aware, right? Like they're just like vaguely aware of this thing that they don't like. That kind of ad gets a different KPI, right? And so I'm kind of like going this long way to answer your question of saying like, we'll even break it down all the way to that level of like inside event and during evergreen period, and by like ad type, so to speak, and not like prospecting. We don't even look at it like prospecting and retargeting anymore. We more look at it like level of awareness. And we usually don't go any more complicated than like 2 or 3 categories. Like if it's like a deep retargeting type ad, if it's like a middle of funnel, like they're aware of the solution type of ad, and like a top of funnel, like, you know, they're maybe vaguely aware of the problem type of ad. And they get different KPIs because vaguely aware of the problem type of ads, like they're just not going to, and a lot of times people like say things like, oh yeah, on Facebook, like just do these testimonial, like do a photo ad, image ad with a testimonial, you know, or a image ad with like a comparison ad. And I'm like, well, yeah, they work well because Facebook knows to put those in front of people who are solution aware, right? Like they work better than your ones that are for people who don't even know about collagen, right? Like they do, they're going to, but those ones that for people who don't even know about collagen are still important, and they play an important role. So I think a lot of times when people hold like one standard for their ads and their creative testing across like all creatives in prospecting, they end up cutting a lot of stuff that actually would be good long-term ads. You just got to give those a different KPI. So that was like, let me get off my pedestal there. I was going to say bar stool. I am on a stool, but and just say like, yeah, so we'll set KPIs inside and outside of time period. Relativity is another thing we've used in the past. And that's like, first thing that's easiest enough is just to say, how did it perform? Like, you know, whatever, $20 CPA is no longer the standard. It is what was the average of the account, right? Or what, like, you know, maybe the average during that period was a $10 CPA, and that's the standard. So this 20 is actually not that good. But the best way that we've actually done it, and shout out to TW here, shout out to the whale, is using a attribution model like either first or last click. You could play with that, but going with like a CAC, you know, like a new customer CAC, last click, like a really tight attribution model, that seems to regulate that a little bit, right? Whereas like your true ads that you know are winners on evergreen will stay consistent through this like event period, or maybe they'll go up a little bit, but those ones that are being lifted will like really be lifted during that period, and come, like, there'll be more volatility during that period, or they like won't see a lift. So that's the best, is like, oh yeah, like when I like really make you stand on your own merit and say drive clicks and convert them today from new people, that it shows up usually with, like, when you're looking at something strict like new customer CAC and first click or last click or something like that. So those are the ways that we've found. But yeah, that was long. I don't know, have you done any of that as well, and have you seen trends that are like, yeah, it doesn't help?
I think, I mean, this is great, great, great feedback. There's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah.
I think from what you're saying, just setting those like KPIs, um, like pre, post, during, like I think agencies, or even like just media buyers in general, just have to like assume and understand that these events or whatever it is, like even if it's a restock, a launch, or even like a PR article that comes out, or influencer post, like you have to understand that your marketing efficiency is going to get better,
Right.
right? And when those things wear out, it's going to get worse, right?
And
So like you just have to understand that. You can't be like, okay, this new ad is just crushing, I'm going to scale it. Like you have to understand the entire ecosystem. And then to your point, as an agency, you guys are so, your performance and obviously pay and everything is so focused on performance. Like you guys, like it's tough
it's got to
because
be
like,
true.
yeah, exactly. So,
It's got to be true. Yeah. And so, like, I'll call it out to a different, higher level concept here that Rabba called out on my podcast, and that is incentives drive actions. So step one to assessing how is my creative performance performing and how much lift did I get from this event is incentivizing whoever is doing this properly to assess that properly, right? Because if they're incentivized to want it, like they want it to do well, like, and that's how they're incentivized, then that's what they're going to see, and they're not going to dig in. You, Ash, as both a business owner and media buyer, have unpacked this because your incentive is aligned that way, right? Like you
right.
want to grow the business. So that's really hard. It's really hard to incentivize either employees or external vendors to like really desire to grow the business as much as you do as the owner. But
Right.
that's probably like the really core tenet here is like, what are the people who are making this assessment incentivized by?
Right. I
I want
think
to talk to you about
Raba.
TikTok. Oh, sorry, I'm not
Oh
trying
yeah,
to.
no, I was gonna say because Raba, I think for Triple Whale's like marketing strategy, the biggest push has always been like influencers, right?
Yeah.
When you guys are running the ads, do you see certain events like, say for example, triple posts, a banger thread, and impressions go through the roof? Do you guys see lift in performance with like Facebook ads, or like, or not?
It's a great question. So we're in a little bit of a different boat because, so first off, to your point, John, I do think, like, I don't think people are good and bad. I think people are just driven by incentives. So making
Yeah.
sure the incentives are aligned is great. But so SaaS is consumed and purchased in a much different way than D2C. So
Yeah.
D2C has a very nice linear progression, right? Like to your point, John, of however you want to do, whether it's awareness, consideration, conversion, top funnel, middle funnel, bottom of funnel, problem aware, not problem aware, whatever. There's a nice linear pathway to conversion where in a SaaS company, it's just not that, especially at our price points. So maybe something like, shout out our creative director, Zach Murray has a great product called Foreplay. It's $50 a month. Like that's a nothing burger, right? Like that's just, Alexa's going to kill me. I said that has been taken. Is that a horrible nothing
Oh,
burger? Is that
Amazon. Are you
terrible?
talking about Alexa the person or Alexa Amazon? It's very confusing.
No, my head of brand, Alexa.
Alexa
She
the
hates
person.
it. My fiance hates it. My head of sales, Rigo, hates it. So nothing burger got eliminated from the vernacular. But it's an impulse purchase, right? Whereas when you're spending, like, our lowest plan is $300, and so like when you're spending
Mhm.
$300, especially for somebody making under $1 million for a store, that's a decision. And so what I'm trying to get at is we are more of like a pinball or a neural network, and you get into this web that is the Triple Whale ecosystem, and you might buy today, you might buy a month from now, you might buy 3 months from now. So for us, paid media is not a big lever. of growth. It's a necessary evil in a way, but our ecosystem is, or what we drive, our community content education. Those are the three pillars of acquisition, and paid is just kind of to stay there top of mind, like
Yeah.
CPG. And
That's
so
fair.
we do see bumps on when we turn paid up, but they're almost like a 2 to 3 week lag of like, we'll
Yeah.
bump paid, and then it takes 2 to 3 weeks for that actually to materialize into new MRR for us. And so that's why, and to be fair, you have to be really careful with that, to John's point of benchmarking and stuff, because say we might have had a geek out that month, we might have had a whale road show, we might have had a banger of a thread. There was all these things in the ecosystem that are driving all this. And so it's very hard for us. And the irony is we don't have triple whale for triple whale yet. So we don't have a really good insight into what is driving conversions from our paid media channels. And so the too long didn't read is SaaS and D2C are just, SaaS is more akin to CPG, or SaaS products at a certain price point like us are more akin to CPG than they are D2C. The other thing is we don't really care so much of cost per acquisition as we do LTV to CAC. Because
Right.
we are an LTV play, right? Like when people when
Absolutely.
they get involved with Triple Whale, activate Triple Whale, download the mobile app, all these things, there's not a lot of churn. And so we care more about how much this person is going to be worth more to us in 6 months, 12 months, what have you. And then what's the CAC, the cost per acquisition there. So it's a little bit different where D2C, you're usually, you care about the front end, and then you're hoping on the back end. Like you guys have some pretty tight handle on your numbers at Obvi, so you guys can kind of buy off of LTV, but I really caution people to buy off of anything more than a 6 month LTV in a DTC company, just because there's a lot of fuckery that can go on when you start to
Yeah.
extrapolate. Oh, well, I know they're going to give us $800 in a year. And then it's like COVID hits. And then you're like, okay, cool. How did you, account for that
What'd you
stuff?
do?
So I get
Yeah.
really wary with longer runways for LTV extrapolations for D2C. But anyways, long-winded answer of paid media is important to us, not a huge lever for us. And honestly, the neural network is more important. Like I think of like an ecosystem, and to lean into the whale pun, like the blue whale is the biggest mammal on the planet, and it's basically supported by plankton, which is one of the smallest microorganisms. And so if the plankton dies, the blue whale can't live. And so we think of our acquisition model in a more holistic sense of the marketing ecosystem than we do strictly in paid levers.
And that's a lot more like agency, right? Where it's like community, content, engage. Was that what you said? Community, content, and
Community content education.
education, engage, education. That's a lot more like
Starts with
agency
an E.
acquisition.
Close enough.
And yeah. In my head, I had CCE. So paid is really just fuel for the fire, right? So like when you create good content or good education or something like that, all it is used for is to fuel that, because it's very difficult to directly attribute any kind of meaningful acquisition to paid. And I mean, at a $300 a month price point, I would say at a harder or easier even than at a $5,000 or a $10,000 a month price point or something like that, right?
100%.
But still very hard. But like, yeah, you said another thing there of like, you kind of essentially said that you guys look at it on an incremental lift basis.
Yep.
And there's some people who like assess their whole paid media that way. I don't want to call anybody out, but there's like one person I'm thinking of, and I'm sure you guys know who he is, on Twitter, who's like, their whole point is like the way you assess performance is on incremental lift, by a channel or something like that. And that exactly what you said is my problem with that. Is like, there's so many, if you're worried about variables, right? Like there's so many variables on an incremental lift. And I've preached it. Like I'm not against incremental lift. It's just like, there's so many variables on validating a channel by its incremental lift, that I think that's like, it's a dangerous thing to get into unless you're really, really big, for an e-commerce brand. Like you need to be pretty big before you're trying to do that kind of like statistical modeling, right? Yeah.
Totes. TikTok.
Cool.
No, that
Take
makes
it
sense.
away.
I want to talk to you
Hit
about
me with the
TikTok. So
TikToks.
Rob, I'm just going to ask you to like pull some data out of the air. Hopefully it's real, but if it's not, just make it up.
I have some numbers top of mind. So yeah.
I'm just kidding. Cool. Yeah, no, but I was actually going to ask you for media mix, because I started out saying like media mixing and mixing away from Facebook, which you talked about in March at Geek Out in San Diego. I am interested in if the trend is still the same or if it has trended heavier into Google and TikTok specifically, because I actually have the cold take. I guess it's a hot take, but I actually I've cooled significantly on TikTok in the last 6 months, whereas many people
Really?
have not. Yeah, I love that Ash is nodding his head because you're one of the people that I've seen that's been like, we spend more on TikTok than Facebook. I don't know if you've said that, but like, but I'm like,
I
I've
did. I
not
did.
seen an account yet that I can be like,
I did.
TikTok is
I
better
have a
than
lot of
Facebook.
thoughts. I have a lot of
Yeah,
thoughts.
yeah,
I have
yeah,
a lot
yeah.
of thoughts.
So, but yeah, tell me, Raba, if you've
So
got it off the top of your head, like, have we
Set the stage.
moved more from Facebook over to Google or TikTok yet?
yeah, absolutely. So just to give you kind of some back of the napkin math. So year to date, Facebook spend, and so this is across, we're about 5,000 stores, 50 plus countries. Facebook spend is down about 25% overall. Google's up around 60% year to date.
Wow,
So this is basically, yeah, it's pretty big because this is
wow. I mean, the
basically
channel's up,
Q2 to Q3 essentially versus the biggest spending quarters. This is compared to the previous period, so not year over year. So you're talking
right?
Q3, Q4 of last year. So pretty big to have these bigger or to have the drop off when. Anyways, and then TikTok again is so Google's up about 60%, which is a ton. Facebook's still the biggest spending channel by orders of magnitude. So don't get it twisted
Right.
like it's going out of business. It's still the biggest spend,
No, yeah,
probably
yeah.
arguably the best spend out there. Google's so Facebook's down about a quarter year to date in terms of spend. Google is up about 60% year to date, which is pretty insane because it's such a big number. And I think to your point of a lot of the things you mentioned, but I do think people are getting some mileage out of PMax, whether it's real or not. I do hear a lot of people getting some performance max is what we're talking about. Sorry that we're using shortened
Yeah,
stuff,
I
but
don't think I
Google
even said
Performance Max.
performance. Yeah,
Yeah, is what we're talking about with PMax. So I think there's a lot to be said there. And TikTok's absolutely exploded. It's like 1,700% growth. It's still a pittance. Again, out of those three channels, it's
right.
still a pittance. What is interesting, so this is a little spilled tea. Pinterest jumped Snapchat. So Snapchat is now
Hmm.
our least spending channel, and Pinterest is actually up like 40 or 50% as well. So again,
I get
Snap
that.
and Pins are like basically nothing. TikTok
Yep.
is okay. Google is pretty big, and Facebook's massive. So it's
And
still Facebook is the king. Google's secondary. Um, TikTok is still small, but absolutely exploding. Uh, Pinterest is growing again and jumped the shark in terms of Snapchat, and Snapchat is just. I actually don't even know anybody spending on Snapchat, ironically, but it is not looking good right now across all our stores. So I mean, maybe there's some people that it works for, but that's across all our stores.
it's hard to tell whether it works because it never can make up that big of a media mix. Um, here's how I think of it, and I don't know if you know these numbers off the top of your head. How I always think of it is percentage of spend allocated, right? Like media mixed
Yep.
by percentage. So
Yep.
for example, let's say 2021 is such a weird year to compare, but
Correct.
I'll try and do the same thing and try and think of probably close to what it was off the top of my head. If I were to look across our current portfolio brands, Q3 2021, Q2 2021, I would have said we were 85% Facebook, 80% Facebook, 15% Google, 5% other. I'm going to put all of them together in other. And now I would say Q2, Q3 of this year, it's like maybe like 60% Facebook, like 35% Google. I might be even being a little bit generous to Facebook here. And then like a solid, so wait, sorry, that was 95. So probably like 60, 55, 60% Facebook, maybe 25, 30% Google, a solid 5 to 10% Snapchat, and then other, to fill in the rest. Um, but like a lot of people are like TikTok over Facebook, like saying that they can spend more on TikTok than Facebook, and maybe not a lot, but like
Yeah.
some. Like I put out a tweet and I'm like, "Who are you? And can I
Yeah.
see your ad account, please?" Because I've not seen anything yet that, like, we've got some brands where TikTok is good, but it's still not able to spend at the level Facebook is, or it might even be more efficient, but like at like a fifth of the spend or something like that. So yeah, I am interested in Rob, if you know the numbers broken out like that.
Yeah, I have a kind of again a little bit back of the napkin numbers for you, and then I want to hear Ash's input. But I'm
Yeah.
100% with you. I don't. The only people I know spending huge money on TikTok, I know two people, and one is a celebrity backed brand, and two, they're both really niche products where it's almost feels not like a money
Almost feel
grab, but it's
drop shippy.
100% drop shippy. That's a really good point. It's not drop shippy. Like there's a brand behind it, but it feels in
Mhm.
that same vein of like under
Like they can't
$100. You
arbitrage it
can
on Facebook anymore.
impulse buy. There's no LTV play here. It's get the money on the first touch or go F
Mhm.
yourself kind of thing. Like that. Those are the things that I've seen actually take off on TikTok. Where people are spending, I know somebody's spending upwards of 30K a day on TikTok. He's the biggest spender I know of, and it's a super niche product. And it's very cheap. It's like it's in
Yeah.
it. To be fair, too, it's in the UK, so it's not even
Yeah, and
stateside.
and also talk to me in 5 months. You know what I mean?
To be
Like
fair, yeah,
I'm
it's
not
not
saying
like
he won't. I'm not saying it won't. I'm just saying like that's how Facebook
there's a
was at one
difference
time
between
too.
building a business and making money. And so I
Right.
think that's a
Yeah, yeah,
really
yeah.
important bifurcation of like to the 5 month thing is like this guy could be absolutely loaded in 5 months, but this business might not exist. So there's
Right.
no judgment
Exactly.
there. It's
On to
just
the
a
next.
totally different thing of making money versus building a business.
Yep.
And so what we've seen honestly is as ironic as this sounds, the Pareto principle 80-20, where people are still 80% Facebook, 20% Google is the best performing accounts we've seen. And then
Mm.
we've seen some 60-40s where Facebook goes down to 60% and Google's in 40%. But really all the accounts we've sit across and all the biggest spending. So I'm excluding kind of like baby spends, right? Like if you're not
Mhm.
spending real money, there's no judgment on it, but I'm not including in this analysis. But all the people that are really pumping real money are still Facebook, Google, either 80-20 or 60-40. And then they
Yep.
have like obviously there's some smatterings of things here and there, but nobody I know has a really big mix in terms of triple channels, which
Yeah.
there could be some influencer stuff going on that I haven't seen, quite frankly. But it's funny because one of my theses was that people are succeeding are diversifying their spend, and that's not what my preliminary analysis showed. Where people are still pretty heavily reliant upon Facebook and Google. So again, this is caveated with it was very once pass kind of, I need to check my math, but that's what we saw with our biggest spending, most efficient accounts are 80-20 or 60-40.
Our yeah, and biggest spending, I would say that maybe that's where we're at too. Especially because it's like a little harder to scale Google. The baby spend accounts, I don't know what anybody would consider baby spend, but like let's say under 50, 60K a month.
Yep.
Those are the ones
Yep.
that are 80-20 Google.
Yep.
Those are the ones that 80-20. Yep. Yeah, Ash, tell me about TikTok. You still spending more there? Was there legitimately a time where you were both spending more and getting better efficiency on TikTok than Facebook? Ash is like, well, I
No,
told people there was, so I'm just kidding.
I was at a point where we were spending 50-50.
Okay.
It did not last long, but it was there. And then I think the biggest thing that I've seen is that I have like random periods where I can scale very quickly,
Yes.
and then I have to scale back, right?
Yep.
Yep.
And I've always attributed it to a content thing because like to spend, I think the most I've spent in a day is like 9K. To spend that for like 2 weeks straight, you need content.
Yeah.
And like what I've seen is
Not all of it will hit.
not everything will hit, right? So like if I'm going and getting 10 creatives a week, and like I think there are times where all 10 will hit, those are the periods where I can like really bump up. But then like there'll be a week where like everything just doesn't work, and then I have to bring it back, right?
Mhm.
So I think when I first talked about it was probably like in April, May when we did originally figure it out. So like, but that's the thing, we were so new to the platform that when we were spending, it was driving more discovery, like first time visits, new visits than anything else to the ecosystem. So everything performed well, right? Now you start to hit that like, all right, you're gonna start, showing the ad to the same people, less discovery, less new visits per, session, and then efficiency comes down, right? So we probably like we're at 7K a day, 8K a day, brought it back down to about 1,000, right? And like I think June, July, we were just kind of hovering, and that is when we were like not plotting, but like we were getting a lot of our like ducks in a row to get enough content to support those levels of spend, right? So reached out to 200 UGC creators, got 200 videos, started testing. So like over the last month when we were testing, like we had a lot to test. I was able to then spend a lot more. But now what I'm noticing is that I think for all of August, we spent quite a bit. Like I'd say
Mhm.
over not like more than Facebook, but like I would say like 10%, 15% of like total budget.
Mhm.
Um, like over 100 grand for the month, right? And what I've seen is like this like rise, things like do really well, and then instant like just sharp drop
Yeah.
Yep.
because like the creative just fatigues, right? So when it's like really working, I always like for some reason we're like, all right, don't touch the account, don't do anything, don't test anything, like it's performing. And then when it comes down to it, it's like, wait, we really should have still been testing because like as soon as these creatives die, it's done, right?
Yeah.
So like right now, like if you would ask me this time last week, I was like, yeah, 9K a day, this and that. Like over the weekend, complete shit show, and like I'm back down to like 2K because I had to
Yeah.
cut like a lot, right? So like now it's like going back into testing and like getting more creatives, but like fatigue is real, and like that's just I feel like that's why it's still like I take back what I said before, which is like, oh, I wish I could spend all my money on TikTok, but like I really can't because we don't have enough resources
Yeah.
for the amount of content that it needs.
And
You know?
and I would say that you won't cure that with more content creation. I don't think so. My observation across all of our brands has been on TikTok, you're either spending the testing budget or you're scaling really hard. There's no in between. Right. So it's like we have this much testing budget set aside. This is going to be, we're always going to spend this to test, 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 test.
Right.
Something hits, it scales really hard. Even if you keep testing, like the hit rate on it is just not that high or whatever. Like, and
Right.
it just, you know,
Right.
sometimes you'll get another
Right.
one in there and you might get 2 weeks of scale instead of one or something
Yeah.
like that. But like for us, TikTok, it's like you're always either spending the testing budget or scaling really hard. It's kind of like being an affiliate, right? Like that's how affiliates roll because they don't need to hit volume targets or they don't need to keep overheads or anything like that. It's like we're either making money or we aren't. And if we aren't, we're just going to spend the testing budget. You can't run an e-commerce brand that way. You need some channels
Right.
that will provide stability. And that's why I'm kind of like, I'm not saying TikTok's not good because it's like, I'll take a gravy channel all day, right? Like if it's going to give
Right.
me gravy when it's scaling and, you know, I'm going to test the other times, like fine, you know, as long as I'm not always testing and never scaling. But it's, you can't make it like a core foundational piece of your business at this point in time, in my
It's
opinion.
not. No.
Yeah.
No, I think one thing you said is that like I don't think enough content is gonna fix everything. And
Yeah.
what I've noticed is that this is also true, but what kind of combats it is that, which is why we reach out to so many UGC creators, is because I want to have like people talk about creative fatigue. I think there's also creator fatigue. So
Mhm.
like if you're seeing, for example, like blonde white girl talking about Avi,
Yeah.
and you're still seeing her like in 5 different types of videos, you know what's happening, right? Like
Yeah.
you know what's going on. And TikTok's really bad at circling the same group of people, right?
Yeah.
So if you're like introducing, this is why I think this month did really well because we were testing 100 different creators that like flood your feed of, you're seeing everyone using Avi. It's like, oh shit, okay, there's that layer, like that adds that effect to that, the whole vibe of like, oh, everyone's using it. But again, now these 10 that like did really well, fatigue, now I got to get more. And it's like, it's a lot more that goes
Yeah.
into it to really make it successful at scale. But like you said, I think Facebook will always be like, hey, I can run this creative for 3 months and like it still does well. So I
And
think that's
mhm.
where the issue of the volatility comes into play. So I do think I do think the platform is going to get better with time. I just don't think it's there right now.
User volume is a big thing. You know what I mean? Like it has grown like crazy, but it still can't touch the user volume of Google or Facebook. And that's exactly how Snapchat was. It would be this like boomer bust channel
Mm-hmm.
when it was doing well. But it's like you scale it, man, and it's like you've reached everyone on Snapchat today. You know, like that's
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that's
exactly.
really it.
Yeah,
Like your frequency, you could go like wide open with an impressions campaign, and you'd still have a 3 frequency once you get really scaling on there. And so that's a big thing, and that'll be it. Like if TikTok can get that kind of penetration that Instagram and Facebook have, and like that kind of usership, then the platform will improve. If it can't, then it'll become
yeah.
another maybe better version of like Snapchat, Pinterest. Robbie, you were going to say something. I saw
That's a
your
good point.
Yeah.
saw your little
No,
light
because
bulb go on there.
Yeah, no, with throughout the neons, I still had a light bulb. Beautiful. The thing that you touched on, I think, is very prescient because I think this is the big headwind that Snapchat has, where a lot of people don't buy on their mobile phone. Like you just don't, especially bigger purchases. And so if you're not buying on that mobile device, it can be really challenging to understand anything outside of like it turns into basically a top of funnel awareness campaign, and you're
Mhm.
not really bringing sales in unless it's under again that like $50 purchase of like, oh, this is cool, I'm gonna buy it on my phone, blah blah blah, bish bash bosh, I use Shop Pay or Apple Pay and I get through it. Where like I'm not gonna buy $400 or $300 of supplements or even $200 of supplements on my
Yeah.
phone. I'll probably check it out. This is cool, awesome. Then I go to my computer and I buy it from a web session, blah blah blah. And so like there just gets to be some issues where it's hard to justify the spend there, and then
Yeah.
there's just kind of it starts to devolve in terms of asset allocation, right? Where to
And
Ash's point, like the costs that go into running successful TikTok campaigns, you start to have to factor that in, where it's like, crap, like these campaigns fatigue really quickly. And so
yeah.
on Facebook, when you hit some stuff on Facebook, you can scale to the moon. And then when they start dying, just cost cap it and then test some more stuff. And then if something hits on there, it's just much more, has way more legs. Like the longevity is just so much more valuable versus you hit something on TikTok, to your point of like, it does feel very feast or famine. There isn't
Yeah.
stability. And so I think that's one of the challenges TikTok has to figure out if it does want to get into, because I loved what you said there. And that's when I think the lifebloods of a fantastic D2C brand is, what are some stable acquisition channels that I know will be there and that I can grow uniformly.
Yeah.
Like the exponential stuff just doesn't happen. Like you
Yeah.
can't
No.
grow paid media exponentially. It just does. Paid media does not compound.
Not
Content
not in
compounds,
like
community compounds, but it won't compound forever. Like there's somebody that's
no.
never run retargeting, and then you run retargeting, and you'll have this nice hockey stick, but then that'll actually go to a linear distribution once you get to a point
Yeah.
of like, there's just no way to compound paid media. It just doesn't happen. And so I think
Yeah.
that's the big challenge that TikTok has is, I mean, our attribution helps to kind of see what's going on, and to your point of changing attribution models of like, okay, cool, let's look at first click and see how much like TikTok is actually
Mhm.
driving like top of funnel, because I know you've commented on this, Ash, when your TikTok is doing better, the whole ecosystem lifts,
Facebook
which
does
makes a
Yes.
ton of sense, which everything does better, but
And
it just starts to get to a point where the opportunity cost of like having to do all this stuff for TikTok, where it's like, what if I just work with micro influencers? What if I just do this, that, and the other? Like, can I
yeah.
get the same amount of return or more than just dealing with the, ebbs and flows of TikTok?
So you said, I mean, okay, like you said a lot of like really true stuff there. I think that we're getting into at Structured, starting to work with some like really big brands, 100 million, 200
Yep.
million, like the game is different at that level.
Yep.
Meaning you outgrow the algorithms. You know what I mean? Like it's just like you just really can't put that much more into Facebook unless you want to start using different campaign types like impression. And that's what you end up doing. You end up using like video view campaigns because it's impossible for you to reach anybody new running a purchase campaign. That's where things like Snapchat or like these kinds of things that it's like it does just drive a lot of top of funnel awareness and like some sales, but not a lot, really come into play. But to assess the effectiveness of them is really hard if you're not that big. Because if you're that big, you can do some conversion lift studies and some incrementality tracking and stuff like that, and it actually has some decent statistical significance. But if you're not that big, if you're trying to check the incrementality on, I don't know, $10,000 a month of Snapchat spend, like it's going to be tough, you know what I mean? Or 10,000 a month of TikTok spend, it's going to be tough. And those channels do lift, like you said, they lift the ecosystem, and you can subjectively see it, but it's really hard to measure until you get that big. And once you get that big, that's when other things come into play. Like, if we're going to talk about Snapchat driving that top of funnel stuff, like let's talk about the Google Display Network or like,
Credio,
native
Taboola,
advertising. Yeah,
TV
native
ads.
advertising,
There's
programmatic. Yeah, I mean, there's stuff that has massive reach. Just the GDN has more reach than anything, so it's like on the internet. So like, yeah, I mean, we're getting into a zone where most people aren't in that conversation. And so you're absolutely right. If you're not in that zone, you're listening to this and you're like, oh, none of you guys are saying it's true, then you might be in that zone. But like if you're not in that zone, it's pretty tough to assess the effectiveness of those like real top of funnel channels. One thing that I will I'm going to shift gears and say, like, you guys probably hear my kids screaming in the background. It's really distracting me. I have found that some of those, like YouTube, Snapchat, TikTok, one of my favorite brands that I'm buying media for lately is my own. It's not my own brand, but I'm a partial owner of it. I'm a shareholder of it. And so I'm, buying the media. And
Incentive alignment.
Yeah, incentive alignment. Look at that. It is. We run everything. It's pure last click. We track everything last click, like but you got to be real mature, right? Because it's like you're gonna do some stuff where it's like, we're running YouTube and the CAC on there is really high, but we can just see it's like it's lifting the ecosystem. We see that we're getting a lot of it. So it's a matter of just setting different standards for different channels. So if you're doing stuff like that, something like TikTok or Snapchat or whatever, like you might become a little bit more of a stable, like true diversification. But it's tough. But with that brand, we can afford we have like great LTVs, so we can afford really high CACs, and that's like what you really need to diversify into those channels that just they're not going to be as efficient on a direct click, any kind of direct click basis. Yeah, I don't know if you guys have anything to say about that, or if that's just like a long.
I mean, the one thing you said, right? Like, for example, you're running YouTube, CAC doesn't look great, right? But your overall efficiency makes sense. Like, that is where I will probably say for us right now, because we're not running YouTube yet. For TikTok, I will let things run a little bit longer, even though in platform and in triple whale things don't look good, just because I know it's helping Facebook. Like, for example, today, I was like looking at some of our numbers. Our CAC is under KPI goals right now, right? But if I go and look at like TikTok and like in platform, it looks like garbage, right? So
Right.
like, do I make a change and like risk? All right, like, is TikTok really bringing discovery and is Facebook performing well because of TikTok? Because I've noticed that on several occasions. Or do I just let it run and just like, all right, all things look good, blended looks great. Let me just keep things going, right? So that's like the internal struggle that I think a lot of brands are going to have, and especially like agencies that are running like YouTube or even Snap, and like where it's hard to get that like first day conversion and like show that this is working. It's very tough. So I definitely like feel for you guys,
hard.
but then on the brand end, I think all brand owners have to understand like, hey, blended looks great, keep it going.
Yeah, and blended don't fool yourself, like, because sometimes MER is misleading or whatever, but like
It is.
yeah, dead on. I mean, for us, it's like this blended CAC looks really good, right? And our LTV is really solid, and it's very worth it to us to have a diversification away from, like, if our Facebook ads, the Facebook shut down our ad account tomorrow and said you can never advertise again, it would hurt. Don't get me wrong, it would hurt, but we would survive. Like, our payback periods on the LTVs would get much longer. We'd grow way slower, running YouTube and TikTok, but we would survive, right? And that's the position you really want to be in as an ecom brand. That's why I kind of got involved with that brand, is because I could see that potential. But like, that's kind of like my high level TLDR of like, it's not a media buying tip, but like, if you're a brand owner, that's where you really want to be, is in this position of like, I can actually handle the higher trackable CACs from these channels. And so I'm not really married to any one channel. And that's kind of where this conversation is going, is like channels, right?
Yep. That was great.
Cool.
Amazing. All right, boys, we're pushing up against it. Time for the creepy question, and then we'll wrap it up.
Okay. Let's do it.
All right, what was last week's creepy? Ash? We didn't do it last week. Ollie was out. Yeah, we're doing double this week. I forgot, what was the last one. The Gina elephant once always pops to mind for me. It's the elephant in the room. Okay, so I'm trying to think of what was a good. I didn't do my homework, so I have to pull one out of the hat. If you could be a pro sport athlete in any sport, what would it be? What's the sports league you're going with? Ash, you'll go first, and then we'll give
I'm doing
Get the
F1.
guess.
Can I do F1?
Oh, of course.
That's
Michael
smart.
Schumacher is arguably one of the best
That would
drivers or
be
athletes ever,
insane.
most dominant. That's
Yeah.
a good
I think
one.
that
I didn't think of
that
one.
requires like a lot of skill. Like it's like life or death shit.
Yeah, you get concussions
That's why I
too.
wouldn't do it. Yeah.
You get mini concussions from it, and
Yeah.
oh, that's a good one though, Ash.
That's a good one. Yeah. So
That's a
if
strong answer.
if I'm looking to make money, I'm gonna probably be a golfer or maybe a baseball player. But if I'm looking to do the thing I really like to do, I'm gonna be an NBA player because I love basketball and I legit play basketball 4 to 5 times a week.
That's awesome.
Golf was what I was going to go with. Baseball is a terrible answer because you're never home. You play like 700 games during the season. It's horrible. Like,
Those
they make a
700
ton.
game seasons are killers.
No, to be fair, they make a ton of money, but like NFL players per game get compensated way more than baseball players. Like when you amortize their salaries across, you're living in a hotel room 3/4 of the year. Plus, you got spring training. If you go into the playoffs, it gets pretty long in the tooth. The games aren't as intense, to be fair, right? Like it's a little, well, depending on what position, but unless you're pitching, and even if you pitch, you don't pitch back to back
Catching's
games and
probably the
stuff.
only
So.
thing that's that intense.
Right, because and even then, unless people are stealing a lot, it's not outside of the stance of sitting there, right? Like it's not this arduous thing on your arm where you're throwing lasers to second base all the time.
Right.
F1 I like.
It's mainly
Baseball,
just standing in
terrible.
like heat. You know what I mean? Like it's like
in
you're in a bunch of layers in the
uniforms.
heat.
Yeah. That's fair. Baseball's terrible answer. F1's great. Golf is great. You guys stole both of it. I guess I'd do a soccer
I'll
player
go
thing.
basketball. I'll go NBA. You can take golf.
NBA strong. Okay,
It's pure love though. It's pure love though. I know I'm not going to make the most money doing that.
Yeah, I think I'd play soccer though. I think scoring a goal in a World Cup match would probably be one of the most invigorating experiences ever.
That's fair.
Yeah.
But winning a Grand Prix would be pretty cool, or like a race.
See, here's my thing.
I just want to drive the cars.
Here's my thing with car racing is that like if I have that big moment, I want to be able to like put my arms up and like have the crowd looking at me and me looking at them.
You take a victory lap.
I know, but you're like in your car. It's not like you interacting. They're interacting with the car. You know what I mean? Like you're not out there like, yes, like looking at them and they're looking at you. You know what I'm saying? And it just doesn't feel like the same. Like I like basketball because like what does D Wade do when he hits a game winner? What did D Wade do when he hit a game winner? He like goes and jumps up onto the scores table and like lets the fans like touch him. You know what I mean? Like
that's fair.
Like that's
cool. It's definitely the most intimate, and you don't have any like football. You have gear, soccer a little bit, but you're kind of far from the pitch. To be fair, But there's nothing like football. You're in armor essentially, right? So it's not that vulnerable or intimate.
Sometimes they'll jump up and let them like grab them or whatever, but like yeah,
but you're still in padding and stuff. All right. So what we got? We got an F1 driver, NBA player, and golf/soccer player. That's not bad. We'll make it work.
Cool. If you're golf and soccer, then you're really making money.
Yeah, it's MJ status, right? Let's go, kids. Let's go. John, thank you so much, dude. I love your thoughtful, eloquent answers. Let the people know how they can follow you, how they can get more involved. Is Structure taking clients? This time's yours, my friend.
Yeah, Structured's taking clients. So structured.agency. If you want to work with me, work with us. If you go to structured.agency, book a call, then you will talk to me at this point in time. If you want to follow my podcast, it is Modern Commerce. You can search it on YouTube, or maybe Robbo will link it up if you're on a linkable place. Yep. I'm glad you asked a sports question because I just launched a sports podcast called Triple Cross. We do sports debates. We argue about sports things. So it's a good time if you're into that. And then if you want to follow me on Twitter, it's at John J.H. Coyle. Pretty simple. That's probably where I'm most active in terms of socials. You could connect with me on LinkedIn, but like we're not going to talk. So that's how you can follow me.
Amazing. You've been dropping some hot takes on Twitter as well. I like it.
I'm a big fan of seeing if I can just stir up the pod on the Bird app. Honestly, that's kind of what I'm about.
You've been doing good work there. Good work. Ash, if people see a vitamin shop, what do they need to do?
If you are by a vitamin shop, please go in, find some Avi, move it up a shelf. No, I'm just kidding. Take a picture, send it to me on Twitter, and tag me. Yeah, that's it. And then I'm on Mentor Pass if you need help with anything paid. Follow me on the Bird at Ashvin Melwani. And yeah, that's it for me.
Amazing. Are you on Mentor Pass yet, John?
I am. Yeah, I guess you could find me there
Amazing.
too. Mentor Pass.
Yeah.
Yep.
Buy some of John's time. Shout out Kenny for having an amazing platform. That's it for us, folks. Another one in the books. What do we got? We got Whale Mail every Tuesday, Thursday. You can subscribe there. It's our amazing newsletter. Subscribe at triplewhale.com/whale mail. We're on the Bird app at Triple Whale. What else we got? We got some really cool events coming up. We have a pickleball tournament. You guys should sign up. You should come out. We'll drop a link for that, the Beluga Bash. We're doing a creative event. It's another one in the books. Ash, always a pleasure. John, thank you for taking the time. And then go follow these wonderful humans on the Bird app. If you're not, send Ash his picture of Avi and then buy some of those Fruity Pebble. What is it? The Fruity Pebble protein bars or whatever? Dude, I'm addicted to
Oh,
those.
the fruity
Like
cereal.
crack.
Oh, we
my
have
God,
I
You got
think by the
some for
time
me?
this comes out, yeah, the time this comes out, we just launched a new flavor.
Oh man, those are
Gotta
so
send you.
good. Oh, those are so amazing.
Fire.
They're amazing. Awesome, folks. Thanks so much for the time. If you do enjoy this podcast, definitely tell your friends. Subscribe to our YouTube channel or any podcast listener of your choice. And we'll see everyone on the flip. Thanks again, guys.